Welcome to Musings from Arledge on WeAreSC. I apologize for the absence. I was in trial for the last month and completely overwhelmed, and that means I shirked my duties here. But I am happy to have with me today a special guest, Rodney McNeill, a good friend of mine. And when I say that, it's true. All the time you hear hosts say that this person's a good friend of mine, but in this case, that's actually legitimate. I'm 49 years old, and I have probably known Rod and his wife Pam for, I don't know, 45 of those years. I don't know, but a very, very long time. And Rod, as many of you probably know, was a former USC tailback, played in the John McKay years, and we're going to talk about some of that coming up. But first, let me just welcome you to the show, Rod. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Chris, thank you very much. And I have to say, too, Chris, you're right about the 45 plus years we've known each other. In fact, one of my most vivid memories was when we were together at a camp up in the mountains. You were sleeping in the upper bunk and I was in the lower bunk, and you woke me up abruptly when you crashed on the floor.
Yeah, don't tell people about that. That probably explains a lot of what's going on with me today, that fall from the upper bunk onto my head. But yeah, so I was, I met Rod when I was a small child, and as a kid growing up who loved football, Rod was something of a folk hero of mine because I knew he played tailback at USC. I knew he played running back in the NFL. And when you're a kid and you meet somebody who had done those things, and by the way, is just an enormous person anyway, so he was larger than life physically. Rod was a hero of mine. It wasn't until many years later when I started to understand that actually that football career is one of the least interesting things about you, Rod. For those who know Rod, he is just about the most decent, kind, God-fearing guy you're ever going to meet. A genuinely good person, and somebody that I'm proud and pleased to know. So if you haven't met Rod yet, you should. I'll give you his address at the end of this so you can stop by and greet him. But everybody's welcome. Come on in. Pam will have snacks ready. Just knock a couple times. If they don't answer, just walk in and make yourself at home. Okay, Rod, let's talk about some stuff. It was just recently signing day, and so there have been articles on WeAreSC and other places about recruiting. I want to talk to you about recruiting. It's been a long time since you were recruited, but at the time, you were what we would call now a five-star recruit. I mean, clearly one of the top running back recruits in the country. One, you were big, 6'2", 6'3", over 200 pounds, fast, made the CIF finals as a hurdler. You had the CIF record for most rushing yards in a game at the time. So you were an elite recruit. And, the process was probably a little bit different then than it is now. But I'm just curious, what was that like, being a high school kid and having John McKay and all these other guys chase after you, trying to get you signed on the dotted line?
Well, it's interesting, Chris, because, I came from a family of athletes. I have 8 brothers and sisters, and 2 of my older brothers were football players. So they kind of infused in me a desire to play football at the highest level that I could. But none of them made it to the level that both Fred and I did. But they did play for my brother Bob played at Virginia State University, where he was a captain of the team. And my brother Chuck played in high school and here locally at Mount Sac. But, the whole thing then was based on my education from television, which you could always get Notre Dame football games on, and movies like The Four Horsemen, I think was the name of the movie, where they talked about Newt Rockne and some of the teams that were playing back in those days, when went for the Gipper, all those kind of iconic football programs were available and always on TV. So I used to watch football a lot with my dad, and became a great fans of people like Jim Brown and Gail Sayers. And then when we moved to California, that whole scenario became a possibility, became, yeah, you can actually make it, because nobody from my area was going to college in North Carolina. Nobody was going to places like SC or even Notre Dame or even North Carolina or Duke. That was only for the white players, which we spoke about briefly. So when I got to California, it was a total change. My neighborhood went from being totally black to almost completely white, with a smattering of Hispanic people. So we went to school at a local school there where we were interacting with people that were totally different, almost spoke a different language, because we were not used to the way things were taught in school, the way they communicated, and constantly in a bit of a strange feeling because we didn't necessarily feel like we fit. Oddly enough, though, my mom and dad both got involved in politics when they moved out here, so they pushed us to get involved as well and run for office. So I ran for student body president in my junior high and won, and we just got involved, started mixing. But when I got to high school, that was the first time I'd ever played football, and real contact. And I wasn't very good my freshman year. I was on the
Really?
beat. I was on the B team. I really had no concept of how to play. Well, my brother Fred made the Pop Warner team, and he was outstanding as a Pop Warner player. When I tried out, though, at the same time, I couldn't make it because I was too big. I weighed too much. I couldn't make it. I had to sit out a year while he played, and I was pretty frustrated watching him. But I was glad I had that year to just sit out and watch, because my second year of high school is when I actually started to play and have a chance to play on the varsity level. Funny, I played defensive back in one game, Chris, and I actually had 4 interceptions. That was the first time I ever played defense. I had 4 interceptions. I think it was like the quarterback was throwing the ball to me all the time. So,
All right. So, two things. First of all, when you started off that answer, you started to talk about always seeing Notre Dame on TV and Newt Rockne. And I was worried for a second there that you were going to admit to me, for the first time I can remember, that you grew up a Notre Dame fan. Is that what you were going to say?
well, I'm afraid I was a Notre Dame fan. I love the golden dome helmets. They played straight up football. I didn't know anything about USC. I don't think there was ever a game that came on that I saw where USC was playing. Anybody in the West Coast, for that matter.
Yeah.
It was all,
All right. We're almost going to cut this interview short right now. But
I,
let's let me
I,
ask you. Let's
wait.
get away from that. Let's get away from that because it's making me unhappy.
I hear you.
Let's talk. When you were you're playing on the high school varsity as a sophomore. How long did it take before you and other people started to realize, wait a minute, this guy's a little bit different than everybody else? I mean, was this almost immediately that you were just bigger and faster and better than everybody else? I think we
Chris?
cut out just for a second.
Yeah, how long did it take? Is where you went out. You
How long
froze.
did how long did it take before you realized that you were sort of different than most of the other kids on the field? Was this pretty early on?
Well, it actually happened. Some of the guys would get together and just play tackle without pads, just pick up games without pads. And I got in the game with them. I still didn't know what I was doing, but nobody could stop me. And
Yeah.
I would run over some of the guys. I was faster than everybody there. So I was like, this is football, huh? It it dawned on me that I had some skills and some traits that I could turn into something uh, potentially good for the family and
Yeah.
myself. Also coming from North Carolina, that was a big basketball state. So we always had lots of basketball players who were, people we looked up to. So I loved playing basketball, and that was really the thing I was focusing more on when I got to high school. But
Yeah.
I just happened to be a better football player than I was a basketball player.
So you were a senior in what, 68, 69?
69, yes. Well,
Okay.
I year with 88. They're playing.
All right. So You were a high school senior when OJ was dominating USC.
Right.
Did that play a role in you deciding to choose USC?
Absolutely, because one of the things USC did, which was smart on their part, is they connected me with Mike Garrett as well as OJ. So I actually spent the whole day with Mike, just running from place to place because he had a very busy schedule, which included interviews on television and a couple TV shows, lunch at a couple different places, and then working out later on in the day. So I really formed a strong bond with Mike on that particular day. And I realized then and there that, wow, this is what I like. This is a guy who's involved in the community. He's furthering his career. He's got multiple options, different things he wants to do and that he wants to be when he gets done with football. And plus, he was a Heisman Trophy winner. And I also got to meet OJ. I actually spent some time with him. Oddly enough, he became a family friend with my older brother, who was an attorney in LA by that time. So he and OJ used to get together and play cards, and their wives were very friendly. Bob's wife was very friendly with OJ's wife, Marguerite, at that time. So, and I would see him from time to time. Of course, everybody admired OJ. I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
Everybody that I ever saw anywhere around him simply admired him, and everybody just looked up to him as a great hero. So,
Yeah.
in that combination, and then just looking at how USC did it, the campus, you go to see Coach McKay, he's sitting in a oak office, it's like wood with a big giant wooden desk, and he's got a huge cigar, and it's a college setting, just like Cecil B. DeMille. They come in, all right, I need to put this over here. I mean, it was perfect.
Yeah.
I'm in there listening to this guy talk to me, and he didn't have to say a lot. Yeah, I think he knew that. And so some of the guys were, being pushed really hard and pressed really hard to go to different schools, but they didn't have to do that to me, and I think they felt that because I was sold. I was. That's not to say I wasn't chased by some other schools. In fact, one of them that I really liked was Stanford, who was coached at that time by John Ralston, and one of his assistants was Dick Vermeil, who happened to meet him, and he's a fabulous person. Still know Dick now, and he's still a family friend. And also Tommy Prothro, who was at UCLA, was also a very good recruiter, and he really understood the UCLA concept of football, which it didn't fit with me, but obviously it fit with my brother Fred pretty
Yeah,
well.
worked with Fred. Hey, by the way, how did that happen? Why did Fred choose UCLA and not USC?
But you got to remember now, we were one year apart,
Yeah.
and Fred's life, he was a lot smaller than me. I got big fast, and he kind of gradually got there. In fact, I kind of took advantage of his diminutive size. One in our house, a little house we had in Baldwin Park, my mom and dad, and we got into a shoving match. And suddenly, I realized he's not a little kid anymore. And I said, we can't have these fights. We can't do this anymore. So, our friendship at that point changed.
Yeah. So what you're saying is USC lost out on a very good linebacker because you couldn't act like an appropriate older brother. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I got to tell you, they put me in charge of recruiting Fred. I think they assumed that I had a lock on that. But I got to tell you, Fred, he wanted to make his own way.
Yeah.
And he was different than me. He was more a liberal approach to things and life, and the way he liked to have fun, and
Yeah.
better environment for him.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to you show up on the USC campus and you are you'll probably be modest here, but the reality is you were seen as a guy who could be the next USC Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, that's what people thought you might be at your size with your speed and the rest of it. You had a productive career. I mean, you were getting 10 to 12 carries per game on the 72 team, which may have been the greatest college football team of all time. You're a fourth round draft choice. So it's not that you didn't have a productive career, you did. But your career sort of got derailed a little bit and turned out not to necessarily be what you expected it might be coming out of high school. Tell us what happened.
Well, everything was on track. Coming out of high school, my junior year, I started becoming a starter. Actually, my sophomore year, I had some very successful games. But then my senior year, after I had a very good year in track, running the high hurdles and low hurdles, I really started out very quickly. Like I said, I had the CIF rushing record and about 1,800 yards, and really nobody else was doing that at that time. Although there was some very good running backs around, McAllister and Johnson at Blair. I was kind of setting myself apart there. And to me, that even added more to my decision to go to USC because I figured I was one of the best running backs. And really wanted to see if I could do that at USC. So and then when I got there, I was joined by some of the most incredible athletes I think we could have ever put together. I mean, it was I think more I see a hand of God in that whole thing, really. And in fact, today I'm still involved in a Bible study with a lot of the guys who were from that 72 team, and which we can speak about later, which I think it was significant. The makeup of these players was significant, and why we were able to turn our season around from a 6-4-1 two-timer to undefeated national champion. Well, but again, things were going well. I had a strong sophomore year. In fact, I was player of the week against Washington State, where I had 4 touchdowns in that game. And to me, I was like, wow, this is going to be a regular thing. But it's a little harder than that. But so then my junior year, going into my junior year, I was I had won the job as a starter, and I was running track at the same time. So in spring, I had Vern Wolf told me later on that he had talked to Coach McKay about allowing me to miss the last scrimmage, and Coach McKay said, "No, I want to see him one more time." So that fateful day, I was um, practicing with the team. We were having a scrimmage on which is now a renamed stadium. Now I can't remember the young lady's name, although she's fantastic, and I'm very proud of what she's done. But where the Salute to Troy is, where we have the right next to Heritage Hall, we used to scrimmage there. And odd play, I was actually having a great day on that scrimmage, the last scrimmage, and I broke outside, and a guy just playing around jumped on my back and kind of rode me down to the ground. And he really did it as a practical joke. But when I landed on the runway for the broad jump, it caused my hip to dislocate. And more than that, it shattered the hip socket, and I had to have emergency surgery, which totally stunned me because I hadn't really had any problem with injuries per se so far, and that was kind of a earth-shattering experience.
Yeah. So you sat out 1 year recovering from the injury, I assume, yes?
Yes, 1 year.
Then you
It's a
came back. Go ahead.
pretty involved surgery. It's like, yeah, I had 60 stitches on my right hip, so
Hmm.
then the way they do it now, more orthoscopically. So they had to go in, and fortunately, there was no damage to the blood supply that goes into the head of the femur. So I was able to just recover, which involved basically 6 weeks of traction, a lot of time laying in bed. So all the work I put in all those years to develop the speed and strength and all that kind of went down the tubes.
Yeah.
So I sat out that whole year and then watched the guys, and it was a 6-4-1 year, as I mentioned. And fortunately, I was able to come back the following year. And Coach McKay kind of put me in the starting tailback position by default, even though I hadn't really been hit or touched for more than a year at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And How was it? Was it the same? I mean, did you make a full recovery, or was it different?
I'd say I made a full recovery, even though, I didn't have the strength, the confidence, the power, speed. I think I was missing a lot of that.
Yeah.
Uh, but, for the first three games, in fact, let me go to the first game, which was against Arkansas. We went down to Little Rock, similar to the Alabama experience, where same colors and the same kind of atmosphere too, where the whole town turned out and everyone's wearing these little pig hats on their,
Yeah.
which was very interesting. But it was obviously extremely exciting for the people in Arkansas. Um, we went down there. I had no idea what it was going to be like because I hadn't really scrimmaged at all. And I started that game, and I wound up having a very good game. It was over 100 yards and I think two or three touchdowns, and we won and beat them. And then at that point, they were ranked number one, and we were ranked, I think, six or seven or something like that. Number one after that, and we never lost that advantage. So
Yeah.
that to me, that was huge. Even though I don't realize it was that huge then, but thinking back on it, it was a great recovery on my
Yeah.
part.
So you mentioned the Alabama game. I want to ask you about that. Uh, I know that you were very close friends with Sam Bam Cunningham for a number of years. The Sam Bam game back in 1970. USC goes to Alabama. Alabama's all white. USC has a lot of very prominent black players, and that game has sort of, at this point, looking back, a lot of people point to that as a significant event in civil rights in terms of integrating the South, and Bear Bryant, probably the most probably the most powerful guy in the South, either concluding after that or thinking even before that he knew he was going to have to integrate in order to compete with some of the other programs, but it's took on sort of a mythological significance. Um, did you have a sense going into that 1970 game that there was something special about
Um, well, yeah, I knew there was something special. Like I said, I came from a totally segregated environment, and I could see from the excitement of the coaches, the other players, especially some of the trepidation of the African American players, that we might be going into hostile territory. So the only issue was I wasn't going to play it. So I kind of focused the way some of the other players were.
it? Yeah,
I was had a kind of a bum knee, but I didn't get to play. But I knew we were doing something unique. And now as I look back and I look at all the things that are happening from both from a history perspective and just look at what else was going on in the country, there was a huge migration at that time of African Americans moving from the South, coming out west. So we were actually, my family was part of that whole migration, and a lot of the other guys on the team, their families were part of that migration too. So, and you look at that with everything that was going on in the whole country, it was truly just really an amazing thing to look at where we were then and where we are now, and how much things have changed, and then again how they have not changed that much. So it's really significant.
yeah.
Very
So tell us, just about everybody watching this knows who Sam Bam Cunningham is and what he was like as a football player. But you guys were very close. What
yeah.
was Sam Bam like as a guy?
Well, there is not much I can say that would be superfluous as far as Sam Cunningham is concerned. To me, he's one of the great individuals of our time, and it sounds like that's a lot of fluff because I mean there are a lot of great people in this country and done incredible things, especially in light of what had to be done as relative from a race perspective. But I mean, Sam was so great, but simultaneously to that, he was extremely humble.
Mm,
And I think that was probably his most endearing quality was he had all this athletic ability, but he was never one to ever make you feel like you didn't like greatness in him. Sometimes you meet guys and they're great, and you go, man, what a horrible attitude that person has. He's barely a human being. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sam was everybody loved Sam, and not just because of the way he was humble, but he played football so effectively, so almost viciously the way he went about it. I mean, he was gonna take care of his job. And that's what we had a lot on that team. We had guys who, hey, it's my job to do this. I'm part of the team. I'm going to do my job. You do your job, and we're all going to be good. So it was very special to be on that team. And Sam, along with some of the other guys, he was the guy who made that happen.
So you said a few minutes ago that you almost saw the hand of God in bringing together that group of guys in 1972, but I didn't get a chance to follow up on that yet. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, obviously recruiting is a hit or miss situation. You don't know who you're going to wind up with. But to me, the kind of character we had, and people like Sam, like Charlie Young, and then people like Mike Ray, who was also an outstanding athlete, Dave Brown, some of the linemen we had, Dave Brown, Kraft, and of course my buddy Charlie Young. Uh, a lot of the guys had a spiritual background. Charlie, in fact, his father was a minister. So, and we had several guys like that who understood what it meant to be a Christian and how integrating that into your life and into sport. So that's basically what I meant. Is when I looked around, we stood there. A lot of us played in the Shrine Football All-Star game, and I remember standing there and looking at the people that were lining up with us, and knowing that we were going to be playing together for 4 years. And just it was a great feeling. It was like, man, I made the right choice. I made the
Yeah.
right choice.
So let me ask you, when growing up in North Carolina as a kid, I mean, you had firsthand experience with segregation and Jim Crow and discrimination, and um, probably it's a discussion for another day. The extent to which the world still has remnants of that, but it wasn't a matter of remnants at the time. It was in your face, and so I'm curious when you get to USC and you have the black and white players both together on one roster at a time that was still, I guess you could say, racially charged in the early 1970s. What was that like? How did the team manage to get along? Was it a problem? Was it tough?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. And let me just speak back to North Carolina a bit too, because it was so real. I had brothers and sisters who were older than me who had actually gone and participated in some demonstrations where they went just to have lunch at a lunch counter and wound up getting arrested by the police, put in jail, and had to have my parents going to get them out. My dad, in fact, had been a former policeman, so he fortunately had some connections there that probably made that easier. But I mean, we went from that real life, real situation to coming out here and suddenly, we have a quarterback by the name of Jimmy Jones, who was an incredible athlete, great quarterback, great leader, and an all-around good person. He wasn't the kind of guy. He was similar to Sam in terms of extremely humble, the kind of guy who just really wanted to get the job done. But then suddenly, some of the atmosphere that was happening in the country was starting to take place on our team, where there were factions. Some of the guys wanted to support Mike Ray, who was also a very good quarterback, and some were, staunchly behind Jimmy. And suddenly, since we were not winning, it just exacerbated that situation where suddenly the attitudes were anti-black, anti-white, and it really caused a schism on the team. I was a little bit different in that sense that in that year we had the last 6-4-1 team. I could kind of sit back and watch because I wasn't playing, and I could feel the attitude change, and it was definitely not one that was going to be good for having a winning football season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What turned
And
that around?
well, I mean, there are a lot of good stories about that one too, by the way. Um, one of the guys who's in our Bible study now, Dave Brown, he's a strong Christian believer, and he actually went to had a meeting. Him and one of the other players went and had a meeting with Coach McKay and asked Coach McKay if he would allow them to have a prayer and do some Bible study, have a prayer before and I think before and after the game. And it's, to my surprise, Coach McKay said yes. So that started a whole different um, way of interacting. And guys started to see each other above and beyond our sports situation and look at each other more as human beings and who had needs and who were shared the same a common faith and a common belief and a sense of brotherhood and that camaraderie that started in that uh, small step, you could say, was a huge leap for USC football, in my opinion. The brotherhood that exists now, I think, still carries over from back in those days. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Two more topics. Uh, First, your impressions of the current state of USC football, which probably a little bit different than if I would have asked you this a year and a half ago. But first, give me your thoughts on the USC football program today. And as part of that, I'm curious what you think of this new style of play with spreading it out and throwing the ball 45 times a game instead of handing it to a big running back to run it 30 times a game. What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, it takes some getting used to, no question about that. But you look at where we've been the past, what, 20 years almost. It's really shocking to think that we would have to go in this direction in order to somewhat reinstate the uh, the mystique of USC football. But I think, when you have a person like the quarterback we have, Caleb Williams, you kind of have to let him do what he can do. I am a bit concerned though, because I think although we made an incredible turnaround, and I'm so grateful for that because frankly it was getting pretty hard to stomach what was going on.
It's tough to watch. Yeah.
It's tough to watch, tough to show your face around other non-USC people. And the thing that really bothered me was being around other schools that have been more successful. They didn't seem to have any understanding that USC used to be a great power. It's like they talked about us like we were St. Mary's or somebody, some small division 3 or 4 school. So
Yeah.
and that kind of slapped me in the face one day. I was like, wow, they don't even know who we were.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, but I mean, this today, I mean, this is in who could have imagined that we would be in this state? Because again, to me, football is about your school, your team, your girlfriend, your parents. It wasn't about money. That was an aside. You know what I mean? And nobody was talking about so much money that it kind of surpassed everything. And then, I mean, look at people like, I mean, the guy we talked about, OJ Simpson. I mean, he made nothing near what these guys are making who never even played.
Yeah.
So it's, I really think it's out of control, frankly. And I hope that somehow we can draw it back without totally continue to pursue.
We had a little hiccup again. You said you're hoping that somehow we can draw it back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do because I think it's just very unfortunate that it's fallen into this kind of essentially a trap, I think. Because I mean, money is so attractive in our world today. I think the only place it can go from where it is now is down.
Mm,
And that's, I mean, really, when you think about it, how much money is a person willing to put on his life, on his sense of well-being, on his ability to think and live with his family after football? I mean, it just there's no way you can be protected, unless you're in some kind of a heretofore undeveloped uh, armor that people will be wearing. There's no way you can protect a guy.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Probably a lot of the people watching this show have heard of your brother Fred. He was obviously a great player at UCLA and a great player with the Vikings for a long time, a decade or so, and a really good guy, because I had a chance to meet Fred on a number of occasions. Tell us first of all what happened with Fred, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about the lessons that you might take from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Fred would tell me stories about, you know, how he would play in a game. And he was similar to Sam in that he played all out. That's the only way he could play was all out. And he was going to throw his body around as if he was invincible. But he would tell me how, again, he had concussion where they would bring him out of the game and he would be literally throwing up from the concussion and then go in the game and play, after a few minutes.
Mm.
When he would tell me that, it's like, I never seen that happen at USC. You got knocked out, got deaned, we used to call it. And, they give you some amyl nitrate and, stun you back into a sense of reality and you can go back and play. But usually, the person had that happen, they would be done. But Fred, he said, yeah, several games, that would happen to him. So, it was the odd thing about it too is, Fred went on to become a lawyer. I think you knew that. And he was practicing law, but he started having deficiencies in his ability to practice law. And everybody was thinking, wow, Fred's really a flake. But in
Mm.
actuality, his disease was affecting his ability to function as a human being, to continue to be successful.
Yeah.
The talented as a football player, talented as intellectually, but before I knew it, before we could even get a grasp on what was happening, he was homeless. His wife and his children were separated from him because they didn't really understand what was going on either. So,
Yeah.
and I think there's some blame that could be placed on that situation because I mean these are not things that people didn't know were happening. There are several other players who committed suicide and have had their lives totally, turned upside down. Families hurt. Fred was definitely all of that.
Yeah.
He was, in fact, the first player to be diagnosed with the tau protein that they say is part of the initial stages of CTE.
Yeah.
They died Fred while he was still alive, which heretofore they hadn't been able to do that. It had to be in a post situation.
So what do we? I'm curious what your perspective is now. I mean, you obviously in the 70s when you played, in the 90s when I played, we didn't know then what we know now about CTE and about the long-term damage. And your son Gray played in high school and college. He's only a few years younger than I am, but that was still 20 plus years ago that he was playing. What's your perspective now? Should we be doing this still? Are there things we need to do to make the game safer? I mean, um, I can't imagine a world without football, but I'm wondering if at some point, some decades from now, that's exactly what we'll have. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, Chris, I mean, if you look at some of the uh, communication right now, I mean, they're trying to teach different technique, um, but frankly, you're still going to have some of those hits that, even though you're not using your head, you don't use your head, so your neck gets jacked up, your
Yeah,
back is destroyed. So again, I don't know if we can protect guys and still have the level that the fan base, the fans want to see. They want that violence. They want that big hit that loosens the ball so you can recover that fumble and take it the other way.
yeah,
That, and so I think it becomes something that's really almost for an elite group, when you look at the cost, the money that's being paid to the players, the cost to get into a game, it's becoming almost a specialized kind of entertainment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not anything recognizable to me from the way a game started when I was playing.
Yeah.
So I don't. I might take the government stepping in and saying you guys can't do this anymore. But I don't see it stopping. I
Yeah.
don't see it safer, and I don't see it getting the injuries. And we only hear about a little. We hear about the injuries, but I mean, there are guys having biceps torn from their arms and their triceps, or incredible injuries just because of the speed and size of these players now.
Yeah.
I didn't hear about those things, and
Yeah.
the aftermath of that is going to be when they're done playing 30 years from now, and they can't. So
Yeah, you're right. You talk about a game that the fans would want to see, and the fans want to see the violence, and that's no question that that's true. But it's not just the fans. I mean, one of the things that attracts people to this game is just that, the physicality of it. I mean, there's nothing like now. If I had been a superstar like you and I was fast and I could score a lot of touchdowns, I may feel differently. But for me, there was nothing quite like the opportunity just to hit somebody, just unload on them. And I think when you're talking about some of these guys that have committed suicide. Obviously, Junior Seau, a very big name in NFL and USC circles, who knows how many concussions Junior Seau had. I mean, many dozens, I suspect, maybe more than that. But I suspect if you ask Junior, what do you love about football? I think that's probably what he loved about football. And it's, it's hard to imagine football without that, because that's sort of what makes a game what it is. So which makes the problem almost impossible to solve, I think.
yeah, yeah, and that's really it, Chris. I think you really have to come to a decision, and I think that's what the players today are doing. Like, you love the sport. You love the unique aspect of the sport in that there's that unknowable aspect of it. You don't know what's going to happen on the next play, which is there's not many places where you can do that in life anymore. Everything's planned out, engineered, produced, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And football, only places where you really we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who's really going to win.
Yeah.
Although I think they're losing some of that too, if I can say that on this discussion. I think a lot of things are controlled, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm hoping that I hope they can save it. But again, it's just hard to imagine how they'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, my friend. Well, listen, I think our time is up. I appreciate you being on here with me. It's always good to talk to you, and I think people will enjoy what you had to say. So thank you, my friend.
It was my pleasure, Chris. Anytime you ever need anything, buddy, remember, I'm the guy who picked you up off the floor.
I
That's how
know.
you.
I know you are. You're the guy that saved my life and then subjected everybody else to me for the next 45 years. All right, man.
All
Thank
right,
you very
buddy.
much. Talk soon.